why, let's look at trigonometry. Trigonometry is only applicable on a right angle triangle. A right angle triangle is a triangle whereby one of the angles is what? 90 degrees. Say here, this is telling us that what? This is 90 degrees. So this is a right angle triangle. Because it's a right angle triangle, it is qualified to be used for trigonometry. This is A. Let's call this one A. Let's call this one B. Let's call this one C. Because this is capital letter A, the line that is opposite to it, that is facing it, this line is facing it, we use small letter A for it. For this one that is capital letter B, this line that is facing it, we use small letter B. For this one now, this line is facing this angle, we use small letter C. So this line is C, this line is A, this line is B, but the angles are what? Cap letters. We are not yet in trigonometry. What is trigonometry ratio? When you hear trigonometry ratio, we are talking about sine, cosine, and tangent. So this can be related as sine, cos, and tan. Okay? These are trigonometry ratio. What is the meaning of sine? Sine simply means opposite over hypotenuse. Hypotenuse is the longest line. So the first thing you need to do is to identify the one that is the longest line in a triangle. That is the first thing. Because if you get to a community, you should be able to know who is the king of the community. So for this triangle, now this is the longest line. So this is what? The hypotenuse is the chief among them. Here is hypotenuse, okay? Now, what we are looking at are the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent. Okay? Hypotenuse, the longest line. Opposite is any line that is facing an angle. Like you are facing me, you are opposite to me. Okay? Anything that is facing you. For this angle, that's angle C, this line is facing it. This is what? The opposite to this angle. For this angle, this line is facing it. This line is opposite to this angle. So, why this is opposite to this angle, this is opposite to this angle. Okay? As you can see, for this one, the one that is opposite to it is this line. But because it is the chief, we are giving it hypotenuse. What is the meaning of adjacent? Adjacent is something that's close by. His house is adjacent to my house. Okay? So therefore, once you are considering an angle, say for instance, I'm considering this. Let's call this X. Say this angle is 30 degrees for instance. This is my interest. The first thing is, which of these is the longest? That is this, is the hypotenuse. I remove it among them. Who is facing this angle? This. That is the opposite. The remaining one is the adjacent. And you agree with me that this line is actually close to this, something that is close to you. This guy is close to this angle. It's close. Where you are close to somebody, this line is close. So it's the adjacent. So once you know this now, we can now start what? Assigning sine, cosine, and tangent. Let's assume our angle of interest is C. That's our angle of interest. Because this is our angle of interest, this is the opposite. This one that is close to it is the adjacent. Longest one is already what? The hypotenuse. Okay? Now, what is the meaning of this sine, cosine, and tan? If this is an angle I'm considering here, for instance, this is the hypotenuse. This is the opposite. This is the adjacent. Now that you are able to identify that, as you can see, I did not put A, B, C, D again. I'm using theta to represent this, theta. Sine simply means opposite over hypotenuse. Of course, who should carry who? Opposite over the chief. Over the chief, hypotenuse. Okay? Why cosine? Now, if you have said opposite over hypotenuse for sine, you have measured opposite, you have not measured this. So cosine is say, me now, I will go for the adjacent. I am adjacent. Who should carry adjacent? It's also hypotenuse. the way this hypotenuse is carrying this opposite, the same thing hypotenuse is carrying adjacent. Another way you can look at this is relationship. There's a relationship between opposite and hypotenuse here when it comes to sine. There is a relationship between adjacent and hypotenuse when it comes to cosine. Tan is saying, I want to settle one thing. I don't like the idea whereby opposite is befriending hypotenuse. Adjacent is befriending hypotenuse. What about opposite and adjacent? They are not befriend themselves. I will make them to befriend themselves. That is to say, opposite over adjacent. Opposite say, I will be at the top. Adjacent, you will be my boss. As far as what tan is concerned. So these are called trigonometry ratio. If I have something like this, so this is tan, this is A, for instance. Say this is B, say this is C, for instance. Sine theta is opposite A over hypotenuse. Cos theta is equals to adjacent over hypotenuse. While tan theta is opposite over adjacent C. You get it now? Okay, good. Now, there is a shortcut to all this. It is called SOHCAHTOA. 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 It's like you are speaking in tongue, no? SOHCAHTOA. 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 You know? So, SOHCAHTOA simply means sine is equals to opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse. Tan, opposite over adjacent. Very easy, right? Very easy, okay? So this is introduction to what? To trigonometry ratio. We are going to look at many examples to drive across this. Now, if I come back here now, for instance, I come back here. I said, this is the angle I want to study this time. Let's call it alpha. If I want to say sine alpha now, you will agree with me the opposite of alpha is different from opposite of theta. So this now is opposite C over, because this is the opposite facing it. That is C over B. While cos alpha is adjacent over hypotenuse. That is A over B. While tan alpha is equals to opposite over adjacent. Okay? Basic trigonometry ratio. So it depends on the angle you are considering. That determines the labeling, the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. Another thing I want to ask you now is this. If I give you something like this, by the way, if I give you something like this, let me see what you are going to do. If I give you something like this, I say this is alpha. Okay? Say this is A, this is B, this is C, for instance. What do you call this? Remember here, it's already 90 degrees. The sum of angle of a triangle is what? 180. This plus this plus this is 180. If you remove this 90 degrees from 180, what is remaining? 90 is remaining, right? So it means the 90 that is remaining is being shared by this and this. So the 90 that is remaining is being shared by this and this. So if you already know this, to get this, you have to remove this from this to get this. That is 90 minus alpha. Okay? So now, if you want to find this as per using trigonometry ratio, you say sine 90 minus alpha cos 90 minus alpha tan 90 minus alpha. Then you cannot put still opposite over hypotenuse, adjacent over hypotenuse, opposite over adjacent. Okay?